You're listening to the Therapist to Millions podcast, where we get under the skin and into the brains of the world's leading therapists with Dr. Susan Spicer and myself, Damien Mark Smith, as we delve into the world of all kinds of effective therapies with fascinating and challenging cases, plus marketing tips and what's really working in mental health right now. Hello and welcome to the Therapist to Millions podcast, where we get under the skin and into the brains of the leading therapists and coaches all around the globe. And today we have Mariana Bodiu, who was born in Moldova, and she was raised and educated in the US and Switzerland. And she used to work in venture capital, which was where she experienced working alongside entrepreneurs. And this ignited her interest in human psychology. And that obviously translated into a career change. So she became a Jungian Psychotherapist, but she's also trained with the International Society of Applied Psychoanalysis and has started her training with the Guild of Analytical Psychologists in the UK. Now, in 2017, she established her own SimplyWell Private Practice to debutize the conversation around psychotherapy and encourage an open, honest dialogue on burnout, anxiety, as well as the sometimes overwhelming journey, we've all been there, of becoming a parent. In addition to being a psychotherapist, Mariana is passionate about horse riding. We've had horses now. This is the fourth podcast in a row that horses are featured. Honestly, it's amazing. And spends most of her time in the countryside where she can recharge and reconnect with nature. Mariana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Damien. I really appreciate it. And of course, I appreciate your invitation and your time, interest in horses, maybe.
Absolutely.
I must mention that they're actually a mythological aspect in subconscious. So this is why maybe you're going to hear a lot about horses.
Honestly, it's amazing. We had last week, obviously, we don't necessarily put these out in the order that they're recorded, but this is literally the fourth in a row where horses have come up and they feature quite strongly, actually. So I keep dreaming about them now. So maybe it's something, telling me something. What is it telling me? Tell me, horses.
Well, I think if I'd be young, I'd probably tell you, but I'd probably have to look more into the depth of those dreams interpretations, right?
Oh my goodness. Don't want to go there. So just give us a little bit of a background as to your specific life experiences that, especially with venture capital and the entrepreneurship. So tell us about that. How did it lead you to becoming a therapist and working as you are?
Sure. So I think, at the very early age of my career, I was very thirsty for experiences, and being from Moldova, I've actually relocated. Well, at that point in time, I was just sent abroad for school, right? So when you're exposed with so many different cultures and languages, backgrounds, it just becomes very interesting. I was almost drawn to it, frankly speaking. So I think sometimes and very frequently in life, you kind of start on one journey. And I frequently like to actually mention Joseph Campbell with his hero's journey.
Oh, yeah.
I think my hero's journey was just meant to be, but maybe not from the very start in terms of Jungian psychotherapy. So that was kind of like the very beginning in terms of, I started off in a very corporate, I would say entrepreneurial, but then being exposed to different people, intricacies and the existential angst against success or for success made me very curious to actually explore that more.
Why Jungian specifically? Why did you choose that path?
So it was a path that was actually presented to myself initially, right? So I think from the very beginning, I was kind of I grew up in a narcissistic family dynamic, which I didn't know at the time, right? So I became the chameleon child. I was very far away from what I authentically was born to be, perhaps. And I kind of became like a great mirror to all the ambitions and perhaps the must-dos or expectations, which inevitably leads you to a very lonely path. And at the age of 26, I experienced my first and hopefully last panic attack. And I came to the realization that I was not living a life aligned with my core. And this is when it's kind of like I felt dead within. And this is when my hero's journey started, from the descent in the underworld, So in the Jungian understanding, it's pretty much you have to go through the midst of your shadow and the darkness of the underworld to go for the full cycle, I would say, but I haven't gone for the full cycle just yet. And I think the ones that do must be mavericks, but I'm not there just yet.
I love that. So tell us about your the parenting. So how do you kind of help parents deal with overwhelm and anxiety?
So it's very interesting actually, because one of the from the very beginning of my private practice, actually picked up on a few cases of parent-led therapy that were supervised. So I found it extraordinarily interesting because the level of awareness that parenting is at now was not the same as where I was growing up. So that pretty much ignited a great interest in terms of how I can support parents to forge a better experience, not only for their children, but for themselves as well. So there's multiple techniques depending on the case, right? But frequently what happens in my private practice, parents come more for guidance and advice over actually pursuing parent-led therapy. I, to date, only had maybe 2 or 3 cases, whereas parents were very open and happy to pursue parent-led therapy. But that requires a lot of time and engagement, as well as psychoeducation. And as you know, time is precious nowadays. So I think it would be quite limiting for me to kind of like say 1, 2, 3 in terms of methods. Because as you know, mental health is very individual, and you pretty much have to co-create that path for every family and every parent.
I love that. That's such a great way of describing it, the co-creation process. So let's talk about some cases. Let's talk about using hypotheticals and no identifying factors.
Of course.
What is an example of a very successful story in a practice?
So I think that kind of like your question, initial one, actually led very fluidly to this one. So one of the most interesting cases I worked on was an acute condition of OCD, whereas I worked with the mother in pursuing parent-led therapy and its complexity, right? So now we all know that the gold standards for treating OCD is known to be the ERP, which is fairly straightforward. However, when you're working for another person, which is the parent, things can get a little tricky. And it is imperative to stay objective in differentiating where the mother is having a hard time supporting her child over her internal mechanisms, or perhaps even the child within. So the reason why I actually quote it to be one of my most successful but also complex experiences is that the treatment necessitated a great level of emotional awareness from all parties involved, but also consistency in terms of pursuing the discipline of ERP. Fortunately, the mother in this case had the time to invest in it. However, what's very important to mention is that families work in systemic ways. Thus, it is very important to assure that post-crisis like situations, there is a harmonious order restored. So if, let's say, for example, one of the children went for a particular mental health condition and is restored harmoniously, it's also very important to ensure that all members of the family are looked after. So that was kind of like one of the cases that was particularly courageous, not from my side as a therapist, but from a parent side, to dedicate so much time and interest in becoming the key element to her child getting better.
Wow, that's amazing. And just give us now like the counter side of that. Give us an example of a case that didn't go very well, but crucially what you learned from it. What did you get from it?
I was quite fortunate to not have this kind of cases up until this point. But I do want to mention that I think when it comes to practicing overall, inevitably every practitioner comes to the point of a challenge, or let's say, for example, facing a bit of an intricate choice. So I think in my instance, the greatest challenge I faced is pursuing psychoanalytic training over clinically recognized doctorate. And that making this decision has been particularly hard, right? Since the whole of my being was in continuing what I'm drawn to, like mythology, philosophy, and the unconscious realm. But obviously there is a clinical recognized doctorate route, right? So I think in terms of being a therapist, it's extraordinarily important to be honest with oneself, when it comes to investing your time and intention, which is not always recognized, but very vital in order for you to actually bring value to your patient, to your client. So that was really hard for me.
Absolutely. Now I'm just going to open that up a little bit more now. So what challenges as a therapist do you face yourself, with your own sort of mental health, with your own running your own business?
So I think when you're in a caring profession, it's really important to kind of not forget about caring for yourself. So you'll be surprised, but this is actually can become one of the weakest sides and traits until the consequences knock at your door in that sense. So I think at the beginning, where the curiosity and the desire to become of use is so predominant, it's very easy to kind of fail in looking after yourself and your own mental health. So I think in terms of challenges, perhaps initially this was a bit of a challenge, but then I became very disciplined. And also making sure that you listen and you're aligned with your body. So very frequently what happens is stepping out of the practice is very easy in terms of, the body-mind connection, but actually detaching from the emotional charge of a particular session is something that became a very valuable lesson to me along the way.
That's really powerful, and I'm glad you kind of brought that up. So how, obviously, we've talked about horses already, and I'm assuming this is going to come up in this answer, but how do you take care of your own mental health?
I have experimented, and this is something that I highly recommend to all practitioners, right? So, of course, I practice transcendental meditation for over 5 years now, and it has proven to be very aligned with my needs. I spend a lot of time in nature because it grounds me. And I do practice the ice showers by Wim Hof method in terms of breathing as well. So these are just my tools. However, I highly advise that all practitioners find what feels and is aligned with their own practice. So I have colleagues that paint, that sing, that dance. So I would love to give like a one formula, but it's non-existent. I think the formula in essence is to honor, truly honor, and try things. Because without experiment, you can actually never truly know.
I love that. And I think, as you say, there's no one size fits all, but it's very important to reset. And I think that's pretty much what all those things do.
Sure. And I also want to mention that our brains are marvelous, right? In terms of playing tricks with us from the point of view of likes or dislikes, right? But if you're familiar with neuropsychology and the way, our neurodevelopmental paths are formed, it takes around 60 days to form something that would actually make a shift in terms of your way and quality of life. So I do want to mention that sometimes I do not like things such as ice showers, but it proved within 60 days to bring a lot of true value to not only my life, but the way I feel as well.
I love that. And, just to kind of add to that for myself, it was intermittent fasting. When I first started doing it, I really struggled with it. But then as soon as my body adjusted to it, it became an absolute game changer for me as a daily reset, actually. Let's talk about marketing for a minute. So you've obviously got a successful practice. How have you grown that? What are your marketing tips for other practice owners?
Damien, I have to be honest, I'm still learning, right? So, and I think you should always keep learning, right?
Absolutely.
Because the moment you kind of like fall into the trap of know-it-all, it's just almost like a signature to failure in that sense. So Reels have increased engagement exponentially, and keeping the posts consistent have certainly impacted visibility, right? However, my practice is fairly young, so that I'm still experimenting in terms of levels of engagements and where I post, but I truly focus on the quality and relatability in that sense. I think personal branding plays a lot in terms of what you represent. So simplicity is key for me, hence SimplyWell Private Practice, right? Because sometimes Our minds can play an opera of their own, but keeping things fairly simple and transparent is very important and aligned to the personal branding per se. So I think in that perspective, I'm still learning and developing, but the primary tools that have been used were my personal website, to the Instagram, and of course LinkedIn, which predominantly becomes quite powerful at this point.
Absolutely. And we're going to put the links to those in the show notes. And I should just say that your website's lovely, by the way. It's a really nice example of a well put together and well thought through website.
Thank you.
Now, if you could write a book, what would the title be? Or if you've started writing a book, what's the title? Or, and this has happened a few times now, or if you've written a book and done it under a different name, what was the title and what was it about?
It's funny though. It's funny that you're asking because I'm in the process of writing it up. Hence, I prefer to build up some anticipation by keeping the title a secret.
Nice, well done. I like that. Yeah.
However, what I can share is that the central theme is intention and the power of commitment, which is very close to your intermittent fasting, actually. So,
I love that.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. Fantastic. And we will also, if you could just keep us connected about that, and when it comes out, we'll help you promote that too. So on the subject of books, what is the best therapy book you've ever read and why? And then also, what's your favorite non-therapy book?
Right. So I read a lot and I must be very honest with you that I didn't used to love reading. I think reading for me was a falling in love. And I know it's not something popular for a therapist to recognize on a podcast, but I think it's essential to humanize the reading experience, just because I do want to mention that people may fall in love with new habits and interests. And this is absolutely normal and welcomed in a lifetime. So there is no set in stone habit in that sense.
Especially the good ones.
Exactly, right? So in terms of the therapy book, I'd probably go for The Woman Who Runs with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. So she covers the myths and stories. She's an absolutely phenomenal psychoanalyst, Jungian psychoanalyst. So what she did is basically, it is 20 years of practice condensed in a book full of generational wisdom, an absolute gold mine for women who often feel like outliers in society, yet very at home in Mother Nature. So when you read, it's super condensed. You can't read, it's not a coffee table book, put it that way. It takes a lot of time, effort, and genuine interest, but it's really packed up with mythology and philosophy. So it has been probably one of the most powerful therapy related books I read.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And if you ask me about the non-therapy, Russian classics are the best shelter for my soul. I am a Russian speaker myself, so I read the Russian classics in Russian per se. So Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and Gogol are really my to-go-to writers, when it comes to understanding the existential angst or just pretty much touching the human soul in that sense. So my favorite book would be Crime and Punishment. And the main reason for my liking it is its complexity, and especially the key character who's Raskolnikov. If you're interested in the psychological interpretation of this book, I'd say Jordan Peterson does a great job in getting its core as well, because he's also a great fan of Russian classics.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of your favorite therapy book, we are collating a library of the books that are recommended on this show, and we're considering doing a monthly book club.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting if you're listening to this podcast, please give us some feedback. info@therapisttomillions.com, because we are really considering, because we're getting a lot of people obviously applying to be on the podcast, but we just thought, wouldn't it be good to do something with all of these books we're getting recommended? So I just thought I'd drop that in there. And we haven't heard of that one before, so thank you for that one.
Very welcome.
Now, what is your top tip for mental health in the world right now? And let's face it, we need it.
I'll keep it very short but grounded. Find what feels right. There is a lot of noise. There is a lot of perfect guilting, high-performing culture. I have found along the way that things work for me and others don't. So I love swimming. I love horse riding. Lifting just it doesn't do it for me. Okay. So I think something that is very unpopular but very important is find what feels right and practice it, because consistency inevitably leads to a result that it may be or not aligned, but you don't know unless you try.
I love that. I love that. Although it does actually remind me that I go to my my personal trainer every Wednesday and we lift weights. Now I'm with you. I really don't enjoy doing it, but I realize that the older you get, the more it is to actually do strength training. Yeah. So I do it. I hate it. I can't stand it. I never look forward to it. But the moment I finish, I feel amazing. And for the next few days, I just feel great. So it's kind of like the ice baths. You don't always want to do them, but the way you feel afterwards.
However, I do want to mention, Damien, that I think weights are really, so I recommend lifting with a person who is trained in understanding how to correctly
100%.
do so.
Very good.
So, inevitably, because this is, you have to do it with a personal trainer or an instructor, you know, because obviously this touches so many aspects of your body. And I just find that you have to be educated in terms of knowing how to do it right, so you can actually get the benefits that it provides.
I'm just going to give a shout out to my personal trainer, John Bellis from Life Force Fitness, who won the World Championships last week.
Oh, wow.
In, I think it was Fiji or Hawaii or something. Yeah, so I think it was for the over 45s or over 50s or something. So he's now a world champion. So, and he's my trainer, so he knows what he's doing. There you go. Shout out to you, John. I'll get you to listen to this.
That's fantastic. Oh my God. You might get me into lifting now, Damien.
Honestly, it's something that I never thought I would do, but obviously I've done it consistently now for over a year. And it does make you feel physically, I think, so it's so important to actually get the body moving and resistance. It's the resistance more than anything that's key for that. I might get him on actually, because obviously he's a trainer. So now finally, to win one of these exclusive Therapist to Millions. Oh, I've got a hair on it. Couldn't get rid of that. One of these exclusive Therapist to Millions t-shirts. All we ask is that when we send it to you, that you take a photograph of yourself with one of your horses, maybe, and send it in for our gallery, which we're also collating. Tell us a fact that blows our mind, or tell us a joke that's one of a kind and preferably not rude to win one.
Do you know what? I was actually thinking of a joke, but my jokes are very, I would say, I'm a great fan of like proper English humor, so I'd probably like skip the joke and I'll probably go for the fact. And the one that I really like, because I'm a great fan of music, and believe it or not, but I don't know, maybe you knew about it, but water makes different sounds depending on its temperature.
Oh, wow. No,
Did you know that?
No.
Isn't it fascinating?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How do they hear the sound? Well, how do they measure it?
I would love to tell you, but the truth, I don't know. I just found it very interesting that basically, I think it might be, you know, when they come up with it, like when they register this music, record this music for like maybe soundtracks for calm and relaxation or meditations. Maybe this is how they discovered it. I don't know, but I just find it very interesting how the sound waves differ depending on the temperature, which in essence is a very different
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, because it's different. It'd be a different resonance, wouldn't it? It'd be a different vibration.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, but like I really liked the fact. I actually remembered it, you know?
Okay, and finally, how can people get a hold of you, Mariana?
So the best way to reach out to me is via my website, which is SimplyWellPsychology.com, as you know. And you can drop me a message, most likely to hear back from me within 48 hours max, or alternatively, you can drop me a line via Instagram as well. So it's SimplyWell.psychology.
Wonderful. Thanks very much indeed. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge and your expertise with us on the show. Now, if you would like to take part on the Therapist to Millions podcast, please drop us a line, info@therapisttomillions.com, and let us know who you are, what your practice is, and what your speciality is, and we will get you on the show. And you could have the chance to win an exclusive Therapist to Millions t-shirt, just like the one that Mariana's won. And so once again, thank you so much for taking the time, and we really appreciate you and everything you're doing out there right now.
Thank you so much, Damien. I promise I'll get back to you with that joke.
record it for us and we'll stick it on the website.
Definitely. Well, if it is decent enough to be stick to the website.
We'll stick it behind the firewall.
I'm telling you, I have this friend of mine, and he's in his 70s, right? So every time I call him, I'm like, Richard, are you still alive? I mean, please don't die. We just can't afford to organize a funeral for you right now. It's getting very expensive.
Oh, brilliant.
Alrighty.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Damien. I hope you have a great day, and thank you so much for the invite. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye. Bye. If you enjoyed this week's episode of the Therapist to Millions podcast, may we invite you to check out our free for life Therapist to Millions online membership course for therapists and coaches who want to grow their business without trading more time for dollars. We've created the world's premier digital marketing resource exclusively for therapists, and it's yours for free for life. Just head over to therapisttomillions.com and sign up now.